Alrighty guys, it is Qaaman here today, and I'm bringing you another Yu Yu Hakusho segment for my first episode of Ghost Saturday. And I know I haven't done a Yu Yu Hakusho segment in a long time, but I am bringing Yu Yu Hakusho back every single Saturday on my channel, as it will complement my Dragon Ball segments, which will take place on every Sunday, as me and Mike from Laughingstock Media have planned out a plethora of topics for Yu Yu Hakusho from here on out. So without wasting any more time, let's get straight into this video, as I'm going to be doing a review on a movie that's not very well talked about, but there are actually two movies for Yu Yu Hakusho, and the movie I will be talking about today is Yu Yu Hakusho: The Golden Seal. So let's get started. So let's first start off by talking about the plot. Now, I'm going to tell you guys right now that this is a spoiler alert, so for those of you who don't want to know anything about this movie, even though it's extremely old, you can tune off now, and I don't want to narrate too much about it. So essentially, this movie starts off with Koenma going on vacation, and he's being captured by this demon by the name of Garuga. We later find out that Garuga is actually a henchman of this demon by the name of Kawashura. And essentially, the reason why they captured Koenma is because they wanted control over the Golden Seal, which essentially makes decisions for the dead. And obviously, this puts in motion the rest of the events of the movie, because after capturing Koenma, Botan goes to alert Yusuke and Kuwabara, and then the whole movie takes its course there to try and bring, Koenma back, and obviously try to stop them from actually capturing or forcing them to give them the Golden Seal as a whole. We find out later on that Garuga was actually the main villain himself, and he posed as a henchman to Kawashura in order to help himself get his hands on the Golden Seal. After this, Botan points out that his real identity is Yasha and that he is a wanted demon. After taking the Golden Seal, as you would have guessed, a huge fight would erupt between Yusuke and Yasha, and as you probably would have also have guessed, Yusuke would find a tricky way to win despite being outmatched blow for blow and obviously having the disadvantage in the fight. Now, after Yusuke defeats Yasha, we learn afterwards that Kawashura was truly trying to get revenge on Koenma for one of the most silly, immature reasons that you could imagine. This is because of the fact that Koenma stole a girl that Kawashura was trying to, I guess you can say, impress in the Spirit World Kindergarten many years ago, and this added a very lighthearted tone to the film, but I found that it was pretty funny. And as a result of it all, both Kawashura and Koenma received 10,000 spankings as punishment for all of the trouble that was caused. So, in terms of the plot, I'm going to have to give this movie 4 Suzakus, and the reason why I'm going to give it 4 Suzakus is because I feel that it was a nice little plot, but it wasn't serious enough to really captivate the audience as you would in a more serious scenario, and it was lighthearted, but it was fun and entertaining to watch how the characters go from essentially trying to track down Koenma to the final fight itself, and that was interesting enough. Moving on to the action took place in 2 categories. The first is where we see Yusuke and his gang taking on hordes of minor demons who individually posed no threat, but collectively they took some time to defeat. It is here where we see Kurama and Hiei going in to help Yusuke and Kuwabara in the fight against the minor demons, where we see a minor demon actually manages to snatch the Golden Seal, but Hiei, in a very future Trunks-like fashion, managed to take care of that demon. These action sequences were fun to watch, and it was like watching the Walking Dead cast kill minor demons. Repetitive, but yet very entertaining. Moving on to the next action sequence, we see Yusuke's fight with Yasha, and what made this fight interesting is how Yusuke managed to defeat a villain who appeared to not only be stronger, but possess the ability to reflect Yusuke's spirit gun. Yusuke literally nullified his mirror technique by having the reflected spirit gun blast a wall, which led to an explosion of magma chunks, which ultimately rendered Yasha's mirror technique useless, which gave Yusuke the ability to finish him off easily. It was a well thought out fight in my opinion, and I felt it was entertaining even though Yasha was quickly defeated and the others were not involved in the fight against Yasha. Because of this, I'm going to give the action for this episode 4 Suzakus due to the level of entertainment, but what kept it from 5 stars is how short-lived the fight actually was, and how easily Yusuke defeated Yasha once he figured out his weakness. Now, let's talk about the usage of characters in this film. Koenma and Koashiro were able to provide childlike and immature tendencies that provided light humor. Botan was able to initiate the primary objective of the film by informing Yusuke on the objective exactly how she did in the main series. And Kuwabara, Hiei, and Kurama were active in the fight against the minor demons despite never really struggling to fight them as a whole. Yasha was shown to be a simple-minded villain who forced Yusuke to be creative in finding a way to defeat him, and he had a unique ability to reflect spirit energy, which made his character a lot more interesting. And although Yusuke did manage to defeat Yasha without combat assistance, this film managed to squeeze in a great character usage in a movie barely longer than a TV episode, and for that I give this movie 5 Suzakus for character usage. Now, moving on to some interesting details, let's talk about some of the voice actors. The voice actor for Garuga/Yasha is Chris Ayres, who we would all know performed Frieza in the more modern releases of Dragon Ball Z, and funny enough, the voice actor for Koashiro was Greg Ayres, Chris Ayres' brother. So both the Ayres brothers essentially teamed up to play the antagonist of this film. Pretty cool fact, huh? Now, let's talk about the timeline placement of this movie. It's kind of weird to talk about because it's kind of in a limbo area. But this movie was released at the point of the Yu Yu Hakusho manga, up to the point where Yusuke was fighting against Toguro, but Toguro was not defeated yet. Which means that obviously the editors would have intended for this to have taken place before the Dark Tournament arc. But then again, at the same time, considering that Kuwabara had complete mastery of the Spirit Sword, this leads me into believing that it would have definitely been after the 4 Saint Beasts arc, or you could obviously lump that into the Spirit Detective saga. So because of this, I would have to say that although the timeline placement does not make sense, the only part where it could quasi-squeeze in would be at some point in time before the Dark Tournament. Even though the specifics wouldn't make sense, that's the only point in time where this could take place. Now, let's talk about the importance of the Golden Seal. It was said that the Golden Seal was important because whoever got their hands on it could control the Order of the Dead, which could affect the balance of the afterlife. Bolton said it could even put King Yama, the Yu Yu Hakusho deity of King Yama, for those of you who would be more familiar with Dragon Ball, out of power, which brings into question the origins of the Golden Seal, which is another topic for another day, but just as a hint, it seems to have biblical implications. Now, just a little observation I made at 12 minutes and 56 seconds into the movie. When Yusuke and Kuwabara were fighting hordes of minor demons, there looks to be this one demon with very dark green skin that looks somewhat like a Namekian in terms of his appearance, considering the fact that he is dark green and he has like that appearance on his arms that's very similar to what we would have known as Nameks, as all Namekians tend to have that little patchy thing on their arms. And that was a little observation I made. On the subject of the replay value, I kind of am at a crossroads here, and the reason why I say this is because when I look at Yu Yu Hakusho as a whole, I feel like this movie, even though it's only about 25 minutes long, I feel like the villains just were not as interesting as other villains to keep bringing me back and forth. It's one of those things that you watch it once and you say, I liked it, I enjoyed it, but I'm not going to keep coming back to it. And the reason why I say this is because I feel like Koashiro and Yasha are just not as interesting as other villains that we've seen, even though it's just a small movie. And the reason I say this is because when you compare it to villains like Toguro, Sensui, although they obviously had a lot more time to develop as characters, I just don't feel like Yasha's as important. And I made some comparisons with some Dragon Ball villains like Cooler, Turles, or Lord Slug. Those villains had certain things about them that even though they were only around for a small amount of time, they were interesting enough to see, and they had enough scenes and personality to keep bringing me back into watching them. And I felt that that's where this movie had its one weakness, the replayability factor. So with that said, I'm going to give this movie a 3 out of 5 Suzakus for the replayability factor. So to conclude my final segment on this video, I always like to talk about my most memorable moment when I watch something, whether it be an episode or whether it be an actual movie itself. And my most memorable moment of this movie would have to be at the very end, where Yusuke is talking with Kuwabara and Botan and basically saying, oh yeah, I just gambled, you know, that whole spirit gun technique against him. I didn't know if it was gonna do it or actually defeat him or not. I was just trying it and seeing what happened. And they actually like explode and get really mad at him because they're like, you put the whole world at risk just because you gambled what you thought was gonna happen. That was pretty funny considering the fact that Yusuke really didn't overthink it, even though it seemed like he did. And I felt that was a pretty funny moment as a whole. So guys, that has been my video for today. Overall, out of a total possible amount of 20 Suzakus, I added them up to a 16 out of a 20 total possible amount of Suzakus, which adds up to a 4-star film perfectly. I think this is a very good movie for you to watch. It doesn't have the highest replay value, but I definitely suggest for you guys to watch it, and I'm going to be doing a lot more Yu Yu Hakusho topics from here on out. I have a new series that I'm coming up with Mike, which will be uploaded next week, so I hope you guys enjoy, and please check out Mike from Laughingstock Media in the description if you also want to get additional Yu Yu Hakusho content, as he himself has done a review of this movie. So most importantly, over everything else, please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. And remember, as I always say, to have a great day, guys.